Matthew 13, 24 through 30. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which soweth good seed in this field. But while men slept, that's our subject for today. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, an enemy hath done this. The servants said unto him, wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest. And in the harvest, and in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn.
Yeah.
But while men slept, you know, when you go to sleep,
Thank you.
Hello, Jim.
Hey,
Hey, person, how are you?
you
I'm
cannot
fine. Hi, Harmy.
wake up
Yes,
and
yeah,
think
I
that
don't know what
everything is
happened.
going to be the same as it was when you went to sleep. I'm not talking about when you go to sleep at night. I'm
I
talking
couldn't
about
hear
a
you,
spiritual
but you
sleep.
couldn't hear me.
No, I can hear you. And I left a message. We are
When you
hoping,
go
we were just
into a
calling because
spiritual
we should be back
sleep,
at Parliament
Chris, please mute.
after this week. And we'll be there supposedly for 2
things
weeks.
will not be the
Chris,
And we
same
kind of
please
hoping
by
we
the
can
mute.
get
time you
that
wake up.
1065 in the Eureka
A
building we were
lot of
in because it
things
was so
have taken
comfortable.
place.
Which
So
building you want to stay at?
it's in the Eureka building and it's rooms
I'm going to tell you the story
1065.
again.
When is your check-in day?
Oh,
I was at home
we check out of here. Let me see.
and I had to
One
I
second,
had to be
okay?
at work the next morning, Monday morning.
1 minute. Let me
And
go
I
check with
fooled
Jim to make
around
sure.
and
Be
fooled
right back.
around until it was 11 o'clock at night on Sunday night. So I said, oh, no problem. I can just drive all night, 7 hours. I can just drive all night,
Jim,
go
Jim,
home,
when do we
take a
check out of
shower,
here? On
and go
Friday?
straight to work. Because I was invincible, so I could do things like that.
Okay,
So-
so it would be the following Sunday. Right? Sunday we
Let me
go back
just-
in.
Okay. So I got on the road at 11 o'clock at night. And pulling over was not an option, not even for a little while. I had to go all the way through in order to make it on time. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm falling asleep at the wheel. And I wasn't going to pull over. So I continued pushing through until I was almost asleep. I was just about asleep. In about 15 seconds more, I would have been completely asleep at the wheel, doing 70 miles an hour. And I know it was 70 because that's what I always did back in those days. Speed limit now is 70 miles an hour in many places. Right as I was about to drift off, I looked up and I saw someone standing in the road. And It startled me so bad, it woke me up. And I jammed on the brakes. It was an old man with coveralls, and he was waving like this frantically to try to get me to stop. And I thought I was going to hit him because I thought there was no way I was going to be able to stop in time. As I got closer and closer, I'm jamming on the brakes. And the man is still standing there doing like this. And to my surprise, I actually did stop the car right in about this close. The car stopped that close to him. And as the car was approaching him, I'm staring at him. I'm staring dead at him. As soon as the car stopped, the man vanished. He didn't just disappear. He faded away. And I'm so crazy. I opened the door and I put one foot on the road and I'm looking around for the man because I know what I saw. And he was gone. I got back in and I drove and I'm trying to figure out what is going on. And about a quarter of a mile up, there was a rest stop. I pulled in there and I went to sleep. It was God intervening to save my life. When you fall asleep spiritually, the only way to get back on track is for divine intervention to come into your life again. If you don't have that, you will remain a captive of the enemy and you're going to be lost. It is treacherous to fall asleep now. Not now. And yet, the majority of the people of God are asleep spiritually. A lot of things happen when you go to sleep. If you had to go to sleep, let it have been before, not now. This is what happens when you go to sleep. All of a sudden, it's all right to wear jewelry. Now you don't believe in the spirit of prophecy. Your doctrines are confused. You don't have any temperance. There's nothing wrong with watching movies, any kind of movies. And there's nothing wrong with listening to a little worldly music. These are the result of the enemy sowing tares in your garden. Now, we watched it on here of how when you watch movies, you're actually watching demon-possessed people by their own confession, except they call it channeling. We saw it. The better of a channeler you are, the more famous you become. And Hollywood directors are trained to spot those people who can switch into character at a moment's notice. Those are the ones they want. Because when you switch into character, you are simply channeling, as they call it, and you allow the spirits to come in and control you. The way you talk, the way you move. It's demon possession. All of the hits back in the days, the oldies but goodies. These songs were written by demons. The music and the lyrics. By the confession and the testimony of the artists. They receive their songs just like a pastor receives his sermons. Except they get it from demons. And we sit there listening all these love songs written by demons. But all of these thoughts and points of view were planted by the enemy while you were asleep. I'll read it to you. Selected messages. It is not by force that Satan takes possession of the human mind. The enemy sows tares in the church while men are spiritually sleeping. While men are spiritually sleeping, the enemy accomplishes his work of iniquity. It is when his subject understandeth it not, that he catcheth away the good seed sown in the heart. When men and women are in this condition, when their spiritual life is not being constantly fed by the Spirit of God, Satan can imbue them with his spirit and lead them to work his works. So all those points of view that you come up with, number one, you came up with them while you were asleep. While at a point in your life when you were not praying, when your spiritual life was not being constantly fed by the Spirit of God, that means you were asleep. And it is at those time periods that the enemy sows tares in your mind. And you come up with all kinds of things. All of a sudden, you don't believe in the spirit of prophecy. All of a sudden, it's all right to wear jewelry. And you still think that when everybody gets the latter rain, it will wash away our sins and prepare us to receive the seal of God. It's a lie. The only thing that can get you back on track is the intervention of the Spirit of God in your life. Because if you stay like that, you're going to be lost, because you are in the trap of the enemy. You're exactly where he wants you to be. The majority of the Adventist church. Satan can imbue them with his spirit and lead them to work his works. Are you trying to tell me that the majority of the people of God are under the spirit of the enemy? We say all the time, the people of God are asleep. Well, this is what it means to be asleep. Satan can imbue them with his spirit and lead them to work his works. No wonder the majority of the people of God are going to be lost. This is it right here. It is not by force that Satan takes possession of the human mind. While men sleep, the enemy sows tares in the church. That's why. So that's number one. What happens when you go to sleep? When you go into a spiritual sleep, that's number one. The enemy sows tares in your garden, and you come up with all these wild ideas, false doctrines, and false beliefs. The second thing that happens when you go to sleep spiritually is that you begin to die. You're dying because there's no such thing as arrested development when it comes to spiritual life. You're either growing or you're dying. You're either moving forward or moving backward. You're either going up or you're going down, but there's no such thing as standing still. There's no arrested development. You're growing or you're dying. And when you go to sleep, you're dying. The spirit of prophecy. Already, the doctrine that men are released from obedience to God's requirements has weakened the force of moral obligation and opened the floodgates of iniquity upon the world. Lawlessness, dissipation, and corruption are sweeping in upon us like an overwhelming tide. In the family, Satan is at work. His banner waves even in professedly Christian households. How is that possible? Because they're asleep. And when you're asleep, the enemy comes in and takes over. There is envy, evil surmisings, hypocrisy, estrangement, emulation, strife, betrayal of sacred trusts, indulgence of lust, the whole system of religious principles and doctrines, which should form the foundation and framework of social life, seems to be a tottering mass, ready to fall in ruin. The vilest criminals, when thrown into prison for their offenses, are often made the recipients of gifts and attention, as if they had attained an enviable distinction. The greatest publicity is given to their character and crimes. The press published the revolting details of vice, thus initiating others into the practice of fraud, robbery, and murder, and Satan exults in the success of his hellish schemes. the infatuate of device, of vice, and wanton taking of life, the terrible increase of intemperance and iniquity of every order and degree should arouse all who fear God to inquire what can be done to stay the tide of evil. But the only way the banner of the enemy waves from Christian households is that they are asleep. And they think everything is fine. When you fall asleep, the enemy knows exactly what to do to hold you in that position. The Lord has enlightened us in regard to what is coming upon the earth, that we may enlighten others. And we shall not be held guiltless if we are content to sit at ease with folded hands and quibble over matters of minor importance. The minds of many have been engrossed with contentions, and they have rejected the light given through the testimonies because it did not agree with their opinions. You want to argue with the spirit of prophecy. And the reason for that is because the enemy has sown tares in your mind while you were asleep. And now you want to argue with the spirit of prophecy. Oh, well, Mrs. White plagiarized. She plagiarized anyway. You know, you remember the book, The White Lie from Walter Ray? Talk about the white lie. You're a liar. Because back in those days, it was normal to borrow from another writer. The laws of plagiarism back then were not as they are today. So now you're going to sit up there and take the laws of today and apply them to when she wrote these things and say she plagiarized. No, you're a liar. Because I remember when his book first came out and the commotion that it caused. It is a trick of the enemy to catch away those who are not rooted and grounded and to give an excuse for people who don't want to live according to the spirit of prophecy and don't want to believe in it. It's a lie. If the watchmen sleep under an opiate of Satan's and do not recognize, oh, we got another problem here. And do not recognize the voice of the true shepherd, and do not take up the warning, I tell you, in the fear of God, they will be charged with the blood of souls. The watchmen must be wide awake, men who will not slumber at their post of duty, day nor night. They must give the trumpet a certain sound, and that the people may shun the evil and choose the good. Stupidity and careless indifference cannot be excused. On every side of us, there are breakers and hidden rocks which will dash our bark in pieces and leave us helpless wrecks unless we make God our refuge and help. Now, we're having a problem here, and we're going to have to end the meeting in just a few minutes, because I tried to fix it, but it apparently is not fixed. So I'm just going to tell you this right quick, and then we're going to have to close the meeting. Let's do a couple of more, because we only have a few more minutes. This last thing, the last one. What happens when you go to sleep spiritually? It was in sleeping when Jesus bade him watch and pray that Peter had prepared the way for his great sin. All the disciples, by sleeping in that critical hour, sustained great loss. Christ knew the fiery ordeal through which they were to pass. He knew how Satan would work to paralyze their senses, that they might be unready for the trial. Therefore, it was that he gave them warning. Had those hours in the garden been spent in watching and prayer, Peter would not have been left to depend upon his own feeble strength. He would not have denied his Lord. Had the disciples watched with Christ in his agony, they would have been prepared to behold his suffering upon the cross. They would have understood in some degree the nature of his overpowering anguish. They would have been able to recall his words that foretold his suffering, his death, and his resurrection. Amid the gloom of the most trying hour, some rays of hope would have lightened up the darkness and sustained their faith. That's what happens when you go to sleep spiritually. It prepares the way for your future failure. And it is only by divine intervention that you can get back on track. Otherwise, if you're asleep now, you are caught in the web of the enemy. And it's nothing but the power of God that can set you free. See if we can do one more. Rising with painful effort, he staggered to the place where he had left his companions, but he findeth them asleep. Had he found them praying, he would have been relieved. Had they been seeking refuge in God, that satanic agencies might not prevail over them. He would have been comforted by their steadfast faith. But they had not heeded the repeated warning, watch and pray. At first, they had been much troubled to see their master, so usually calm and dignified, wrestling with a sorrow that was beyond comprehension. They had prayed as they heard the strong cries of the sufferer. They did not intend to forsake their Lord, but they seemed paralyzed by a stupor which they might have shaken off if they had continued pleading with God. They did not realize the necessity of watchfulness and earnest prayer in order to withstand temptation. They could have shaken off the stupor had they continued pleading with God. That's the warning to us in these last days. If you stop praying, you will be overcome by the enemy. They did not realize the necessity of watchfulness and earnest prayer in order to withstand temptation. They seemed paralyzed by a stupor which they might have shaken off had they continued pleading with God. That's the message to us. You can shake it off if you continue in prayer. And we're going to have to end here today, because I have a whole second half of the program, but we're not going to be able to get to it. So let's just do this last one. As the people of God approach the perils of the last days, Satan holds earnest consultation with his angels as to the most successful plan of overthrowing their faith. He sees that the popular churches are already lulled to sleep by his deceptive power. That's where he wants them to be. By pleasing sophistry and lying wonders, he can continue to hold them under his control. Therefore, he directs his angels to lay their snares, especially for those who are looking for the second advent of Christ and endeavoring to keep all the commandments of God. The enemy's plans are aimed for the people of God who are awake in these last days. The people of God who are awake know that you got to get the seal of God before the shaking. And the shaking is the enforcement of the Sunday law. And we are right here. The Sunday law is going to come to pass, but we have to have the victory over sin before we can get the seal of God. We have 4 ways the Sunday law is going to be enforced. We have the Paris Climate Agreement, the Sunday law. We have the Convention of States. We have the 32-hour work week. And then we have Project 2025, which is the Sunday day of rest. That's 4 ways, and there may be more, but there are 4 ways to bring the Sunday law enforcement, either later on this year or early next year. That's what it looks like. But the people of God must be sealed before this takes place.